Welcome again to Healing the Divide, produced by Methodology Books. We don't bring you news and politics for the sake of discussion to talk about, okay, this is what's going on, this is what's happening. We want to keep to our responsibility, which is the bigger picture. So this message is for the white Americans who are good, who have always been a part of trying to make things better in this country and not a part of those who are full of hate. One of the things that black Americans in this country know, who remain aware of history, because remember, every ethnic group has people who stay conscious of what's going on in the world and who pay attention to what's been going on in the world geographically and historically. And there are those who don't, okay, amongst every ethnic group. But amongst the black Americans who are aware of history and the reality, we know that from the time we came here in slavery, there have always been white Americans who didn't agree with it, and maybe some were active against it, some weren't. But the point is, they were always allies who had concerns about humanity that would try to help. Whether it was somebody who was hired as an overseer, who the most that they could do is maybe treat the slaves better than other overseers would, or things like that. And you have people who followed, like you had Harriet Tubman freeing slaves, going back, making trips to free other slaves. Black Americans know that that Underground Railroad that even went to places like Rochester, New York, were connected to people's homes who were white Americans. Everybody knows the role that white Americans played in helping Dr. King in his marches, the bus boycotts, all the different things that took place where even white Americans were beaten and killed also. And remember, even some white Jewish Americans. So there are black Americans who know that it's not some hate white folks, no matter who they are type of thing. That's not the attitude. But we have to say this. There are what we call white people on the right. We're not talking about that political stuff. We mean the right, like the people who stand for right. That other stuff, they call themselves the right. They're the wrong. And there are people who we call the bad guys. But the problem is that the bad guys stay so busy, just like if you watch a movie and you see how the villain is always cutting up and the hero is always trying to find a way to catch up and respond to what the villain is doing, not always being proactive and putting things in place to stop the villain from pulling a stunt. So the white Americans who stand for good are constantly finding themselves responding to the latest tactic of the white Americans who don't stand for good, who just want power or whatever else is wrong with them. So following their lead, we have a couple of things that takes place from it. For example, when George Floyd was executed on live TV in front of the whole world, where white Americans could see, no, it's not just those people are resisting arrest. They saw with their own eyes what black Americans have been saying. This is how they do us. And white Americans who care about what's right, everybody, every ethnic group in society that cares about good stood up with black Americans about that. All over the world, there were people marching against what happened to George Floyd, supporting the black Americans. And do you ever ask yourself how all of a sudden it died out? Because the evil people from the wrong side began to push this thing called CRT. And they began to explain to white Americans CRT in a way that sounds like black people have an issue with white people. Like black people have a position where white people just can't do right, just can't be good. They did everything they could with CRT and then began to explain they're teaching this stuff to your kids in school. So even people who marched against what happened to George Floyd began to lose their enthusiasm, began to lose that oomph, and began to be concerned that something is being taught to their children, because it's like what John Travolta explained in the movie Swordfish. Misdirection, Stan. Misdirection. So I can explain CRT as I explained in my book, Florida is Where the DeSantis Presidential Dream Goes to Die. And I'll do that in another episode. The CRT, for example, which stands for Critical Race Theory, which is only taught in school, Harvard, in law school, regarding legal issues and systemic matters, not about something being taught to your kids in kindergarten. But again, I'll do an episode on CRT that I hope you really will watch and pay attention to it, and I hope I can do this in a way that is clear and makes benefit. My point is, they did that. Here's what I'm saying. They knocked the wind out of the sails of the movement. So what happened to the law? George Floyd, or the bill that was being pushed for justice in policing and things like that, right? Police reform. Everything went with it. Everything died with it. Things died with John Lewis. I'm saying that to you to say, not only to look back, everybody has phrases. Those who forget their history often are condemned to repeat it, right? Stuff has to stop just being phrases that we say and that we hear. We got to understand it's real. So I'm mentioning this to say, while everybody is exuberant and having fun and enjoying what's going on and riding this thing with Kamala Harris, remember that these other people don't just sit and say, okay, we're done. So now you have to be watching for what they're going to do. What's going to be that gut punch they hit you with? I'm saying to white Americans, what are they going to do that you're going to find yourself reacting to, and notice all of a sudden your enthusiasm is gone? You have to be prepared for the things they do. Look at the reality of what you're supporting and be prepared to stand on that and to fight against what they're going to do next. Because they're not sitting. It's not sitting as still as it might seem. Always scheming. So hopefully we look at what we're dealing with the idea that they've always done something to take it away. You know, they did the same thing with woke. And I'll be explaining woke in another episode too. I'm explaining these things because when I wrote the book, Florida is where the census of presidential dream goes to die, I began writing this in 2022 when I saw a spectrum of things. PragerU, Moms for Liberty, the Federalist Society, Heritage Foundation, all these things that you're looking at in the news now is what I wrote about in the book. I used DeSantis as an avatar for all of these things that you're seeing, and I'm not saying it's like I'm some soothsayer, but I'm saying the insights in the book you realize were being discussed, and it wouldn't be so much of a surprise now. And when we talked about it, we talked about things like woke and the reality of it, what it really means, and how the people who stand for good even allowed the people who stand for evil to tell them what woke is, and then you took their narrative and you're trying to defend it as a good thing when the reality is not even the right meaning. So we'll talk about that too. But what's very important is that you have to understand our allies in the community of white Americans, our allies, we need for you to be not just like angry about what's going on or fighting against what's going on in the sense that you don't like it, but try to see that we need your help, but you also have to not just only listen to each other, because white Americans tend to listen to white Americans either from the opposing side and then counter them, or you listen to white Americans that are on your same side, or some black Americans who have learned how to speak and talk a certain way. But this thing requires looking at it from the outside, like you're a foreigner. And sometimes many of us who are in the black community know how to do that. The people who helped Harriet Tubman in the slave, excuse me, I'm sorry, I gotta calm down. The people who helped Harriet Tubman in the Underground Railroad, she never lost one passenger. But part of it was because the white Americans who were helping her asked her, how can we help? And she told them what she needed to be done, and they allowed her to operate and help. And sometimes, you have to maybe realize that even though you're against the people who are evil on the other side, who happen to also be white, you have to try to find a way to get a better ear for your allies in the black community who are saying something other than what the news is saying. Because the strategies are not always going to come from the famous. People like myself, you see me in the car because I'm doing Grubhub, I'm doing deliveries. I don't get the opportunity to just sit home and make these videos. Some people have placed themselves in a position where they're able to do that. So they become popular voices and we support them. But you have to understand there are other voices that you have to open your ears to, because we have something to say that may really help. It's not just talk. I don't ever want to just have a conversation with you just talking politics. It may seem like that because I'm focusing on something, but it's the bigger picture that I want us to take a look at. And hopefully that our alliances will be built on strategies And okay, this is where they're going. We're going here. We're not just talking to each other and beefing and getting our frustrations out. We're literally preparing to counter it. So in upcoming videos, inshallah, I'll lay out some of the things uh, that I've seen and what I've written in the book. Of course, I hope you buy the book. Florida is where the Santa's presidential dream goes to die. Of course, I hope you buy the book. But it's not just about that. I want to lay out some of the things that's in the book because he's just an avatar. I used him because DeSantis, really quick, DeSantis is the type of person who he's an empty shell. You know, like, for example, if two people went to a gym and said they want to learn how to box, right? They both sat in they went to the man. He said, okay, I'll teach you both. They sit in the room. They both watch boxing film to learn form and things like that. He explains to them how to throw a punch, how to throw an uppercut, how to throw a jab. One of the boxers has a natural thing within them to fight and an instinct and knows what to do. The other one is learning straight from book, and when it's time to when it's time to fight, they when it's time to fight, they do things according to what they remember in the book, and they may be, for example, more out there where people like them for certain reasons, but they're not really the better fighter. DeSantis is the type of person who, from school, had this idea of becoming president, and all the steps he took were geared towards building a life. The whole thing, the military, all that stuff. And he's learned certain things, which I'll cover in upcoming episodes, which I also highlight in the book. He's learned certain things that all of politics follows behind. And I'll show you how, step by step, he used the strategies of these different types of people to get to where he is. But he's a fake. He's a fake, just like Trump is a fake. So when you look at this, you begin to see, okay, you have to go past that. Anyway, just bear with me. Sometimes I get excited because I have a passion for wanting to solve some of these issues, and some of them are so easy. It's just that when people, for example, are doing news interviews or doing news coverage, they think on the lines of who's out there. So when they bring a guest on, they want to bring somebody who's currently in the news. They're not looking for answers, except in a certain way of thinking. So they don't even ask the questions that even make sense. And then what happens is we begin to follow along with the pattern that they talk about. Like, for example, these people talk about the border. The border has never been as heavy an issue as it's been until the Republicans made it something because they needed something to run on. They made it something that really horrifies the people. Because black people, Asian people, white people, whatever ethnic group people come from, have never been bothered. Because look, when I'm driving through the town, like I said, I do deliveries. And when I'm driving through the town, I'm all over the place. And I see immigrants, Hispanic immigrants, mowing people's lawns in different places, working in different fields. All of these are areas that black Americans are almost allergic to. The last thing they want to see are fields again after slavery. And most people in America don't want to work in the fields. And nobody's bothered by the fact these folks are doing what they do. They're living their lives and they work in the fields. Many of them are being charged taxes on their pay, and they don't even have a right to vote. What happened to taxation without representation? So while people are claiming these people are invading and making a problem, us on the ground, if we stop feeding into the word about immigration and invasion, we'll see it's not as bad as it seems. It's not a whole bunch of people coming in and doing all the things that people are saying. And so when Trump and people like that say it, we just feed back into it and argue back with them because they're getting to control the narrative. So we keep feeding back into what they say, when reality is, we gotta keep saying, come on man, stop diverting from the issues. You're giving rallies. Remember, you're running for president, and you're giving rallies, entertaining people like it's a show, and never once, and everything is about you. Never once do you say to the people, here's what I'm gonna do for you. So the same way he lies over and over again until the people get it, keep telling them the truth over and over again until they get it. He hasn't said anything that he's going to do for you. He complains to you about what's going on with inflation. He doesn't tell you how he's going to address it for you. He doesn't give you a detailed plan of anything. Thank you for your time.